Did you tweet?
Yeah. Thanks for downloading and listening to a Quick Timeout podcast. Before we get to today's guest, a big thanks to Dr. Dish Basketball for sponsoring the podcast. The offseason for my team is here, and that means players are spending a lot more time in the gym by themselves. But thanks to our Dr. Dish CT, players are able to watch pre-programmed videos and workouts, ball handling, shooting, to make sure that they're improving this offseason. With the new Rebel Plus and All-Star Plus, along with the CT model, your players can take advantage of these incredible resources. To find out more, visit drdishbasketball.com and be sure to mention a Quick Timeout podcast to receive $300 off your purchase. Making his annual appearance on the podcast is Hoop Vision's Jordan Sperber. I'm not sure that we can call it annual if it's only the second time that it's happened, but we're going to call it annual anyways. So Jordan, thanks.
This is my third time, I think.
Yes, this is the third time to be on the show, our annual
March Madness
edition.
Madness. Okay.
I think actually you're only the third. You're only the second. Maybe you might be the first third timer on the show. So you are.
I remember the first one was the best. Just stop listening to this and just go listen to the first one.
Don't turn it off. No, you can't do that.
Texas Tech's defense. I think we talked about. But this will be a lot more topical for March Madness, March in general, I guess.
The Texas Tech one was awesome. I feel like the questions today will kind of be similar to that. So don't turn this one off. You can go download and listen.
I'm really, really bad at advertising. Live stream.
You really just killed us. I'm watching the numbers just drop as you're talking here. It's like several years ago when, North Carolina and Kansas were playing in the Final Four, and Billy Packard just kept reiterating that this game was over. And I could hear like TVs across the country just turning off there. That was also, I think, the last time that he called a Final Four game there. But one of the reasons why I like to have Jordan on this year is because of the Hoop Vision NCAA Tournament Bible. Are you doing that this year, Jordan?
Yeah, so on Friday, in my Friday newsletter, I finally announced it. I'd known for a while, and I'd been starting to get emails and messages about it, which is, if anyone's listening, I'm really thankful that people are looking out for it. But this year we aren't doing the Bible. For those of you that don't know what it is, it was a scouting report, one-page scouting report for every single team that made the NCAA tournament. So all 68 teams, and then some other stuff too. There was a stats page for each team with some data visualization. And then like bracket strategy. And as you can imagine, to put that together for all 68 teams, the first year we did it was just 3 people working on it. It was myself, Rafi Goldman, we did the team pages, and then we had an editor, Edgar Walker, who kind of like put everything together. And that was a bit insane. I did other stuff also, and I'm still doing a lot of that other stuff right now. And to think about, like, that's enough as is. I'm busy right now, and to think about how much I was doing that first year, it was a lot of fun because it was like our proof of concept. I hadn't tried to charge anyone for anything up until that point, and so the Bible did a really it sold above our expectations, and we put it together again last year. I came on this podcast as we were putting it together, and the tournament got canceled, and that definitely played a little bit of a role. It's just, I don't know, I can't really explain it psychologically, but it's like, I feel like I just was making this Bible, and so we're taking the year off, but I think there's a pretty good chance that we bring it back eventually.
So some of the stuff that we'll talk about is things that would be included in that, and we'll also talk and reference some of the places that you can find more about it. I want to start with this. It's something that you said last year. We were talking about like predicting the tournament and the last season push to get teams to win at the end of the year, the regular season, the conference tournament. You said games in November and December are as predictive to March successes as games in February and March. This year feels weird to me, and several teams that I've watched a few times already, I still feel like I have no clue who they are. Do you get that? Do you get that feeling at all?
Yeah, I mean, like the first team that comes to mind, this isn't exactly what you were just explaining, but like a Baylor who was shut down for a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks for COVID related reasons. And I think probably not even practicing, which there is a pretty big difference. I think, practicing versus not practicing during your shutdown. And for a team like that, they have been playing well these last couple games, but it's extremely difficult to adding that into this year to try to evaluate where these teams are at. I listen to a lot of press conferences from coaches, kind of for fun, which is a weird hobby, and they all complain about not enough practice time. It's such a weird year. I listen to that and I'm like, well, it's the same for everyone. Like the team you're playing against is in the same boat. I think even from predictive modeling perspectives, like Ken Pomeroy's system and others, I think I've read where their predictions are a little bit worse this year in general. Maybe not as much as you would think, given how but we're a little bit worse at figuring out who the best teams are this year. And then you have like the Patriot League with Colgate is a top 10 team in net right now. Colgate's played like 3 teams all year. They played them 6 times in some cases. So a team like that, we more know how good they are from recent history. How good has the best team in the Patriot League normally been? Like, so that's more how we can piece that through than them playing BU 6 times, which is pretty crazy.
We heard all November, December about how the older, experienced teams were going to outperform the younger teams. And aside from maybe isolated instances where people are really paying attention, I mean, like the Duke, the Kentuckys, has that turned out to actually be the case? And should that impact how people select their tournament teams?
It really hasn't. I think that Kentucky, like Duke's a little bit older this year than they normally are with Jordan Goldwire and Joey Baker's back. And I mean, Matthew Hurt's their best player. He's a sophomore. They're usually their best player is a freshman, right? But with Kentucky especially, that narrative was for sure created. I mean, Kentucky's been bad this year with a young roster. That's a fact. But there's other examples of teams that do have everyone back. Wisconsin, I think, literally returned their whole starting lineup, an older team, and I really like them too. Watching them in November and December, I was pretty high on them, and they've really struggled here. Creighton's another team that I thought coming into the season was a potential, if things went right, a top 5 type of team, and with almost everyone coming back. And they've underachieved. So there's both ends of the spectrum, for sure. I don't think that. I think that the narrative might be a little bit over talked about, though.
So let's talk kind of bigger picture here. Anything statistically or analytically that sticks out to you, either about college basketball in general or any team or teams in particular?
Well, the biggest question that I get asked about or everyone's talking about is the tiers. Everyone wants to talk about tiers of teams. And, Gonzaga is undefeated, haven't played a close game in a really long time. You can't possibly not have them in your top tier. Although when Michigan won a few big games, people did have them ranked over Gonzaga. So, I mean, we definitely overthink things a little bit. And that's the nature of how top 25 rankings work. It's, a lot based on momentum and more than it probably should be. But then Baylor, like I said, came back and lost that game, or they dropped the game. And it was funny because I was working on a Michigan video during this time while Michigan was playing really well. And at that time, they were a pretty solid number 3, like in KenPom rankings and whatever rankings you were looking at. Baylor and Gonzaga were 1 and 2 pretty substantially when I started doing that. And so and Michigan was 3. And so I watched Michigan, and I didn't necessarily see anything that made me think that those rankings were wrong. I felt like 1 and 2 were Gonzaga and Baylor. We can talk about them if you'd like, but then as I'm making this video, Michigan got a few really big wins and they blew out they blew a couple good teams out. They beat Ohio State at Ohio State, and Baylor took the loss. And I mean, I had this video coming out, so I need to market it as much as possible. And so, so it's like the video is called "Why Michigan's Offense Makes Them a National Title Contender." And I mean, they are a national title contender just because they're not as good as Baylor or Gonzaga, which is still up for debate at this point. But now, since then, Michigan has dropped 2. And so it's really hard not to fall into that trap, myself included, watching a team and just reacting to the immediate result as opposed to like the total season body of work.
So talking about rankings, so we put sometimes too much stock into a team that's ranked too high or not enough stock in a team that's rated too low. Is there any one that comes to mind that falls into maybe one of those two categories?
Yeah, so that I don't even sometimes know what the AP top 25 is, but I will tell you this. I was watching a West Virginia game this weekend, and they were like 6 or something like that in the AP ranking, and I turned to my dad watching with, and I was like, West Virginia's number 6. So, so I'm looking right now. They're 25th in KenPom. They probably dropped though in the AP rankings. They're an interesting team because they lost Oscar Tshiebwe halfway through, and they've been playing pretty well even without him. But I was disappointed with him leaving because they had such a unique style of play. I called it bully ball. That was my name for their style of play, and I really like unique stuff that coaches are trying. And they really changed. Now they play much more 4 out, 5 out, even without him. It's kind of crazy how much they changed just from one player leaving, and they've become this. The Big 12 in general is very offensive heavy right now. It was the best defensive league in the country last year and to start this year, and all of a sudden Baylor stopped playing defense and they're just scoring like 100 points now, and West Virginia is kind of the same way. So it's not what I was expecting with the Big 12.
So let's talk X's and O's and get a little bit more detail to your coaches that are watching. Is there anything that you saw either for the first time this year or something that you're seeing more of that is becoming a trend, or something that you foresee becoming a trend in college basketball?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind, I felt like last year was peak continuity ball screen last year. I mean, Dayton was the second best offense in the country, and they ran it almost full time. Stanford was running it full time. They still are this year. BYU was the best 3-point shooting team in the country. They were running continuity. I really felt like it peaked. And this year, it's not that. To me, what's happened is a lot more teams are now going to like the more or not even the more traditional, but the 5 out, where continuity ball screen is 5 out. It's all 5 guys start out on the perimeter. One guy sets a ball screen, he rolls, but then he comes right back out on the ball reversal. So it is a 5 out. But the 5 out I'm talking about that everyone seems to be running this year is where the center, the 5-man, is at the top of the key, like initiating offense with the ball in his hands, and everyone's running dribble handoffs and zoom action and all different stuff. I did a video on it early in the season, and I mean, I must have covered about 12 of the top 25 teams. Not everyone's running it as much as others. Some run it only a little bit. But I think it directly correlates with continuity ball screen going down a little bit is 5 out going up, and it's been very popular in the NBA too. So that's where it's coming from.
It's kind of the emphasis that we're seeing now with more of like the more pace and space and creating those gaps and that kind of thing, which leads me to the other side of the ball. Have you seen any adjustments then defensively from teams? I was watching a video, I think a couple weeks ago, that you had on your timeline, but like almost the like lack of help defense because we're so concerned with the 3-point shooters that that it is what you do see in the NBA, where they're almost willing to give up a layup or something going towards the basket rather than leave a guy that's open in the corner. I just don't see help defenders just kind of the lowest man sitting in the paint at the D1 level. I know that's still happening in high school, college, and that lower levels of college, but like I'm seeing more wide open layups or like stunts. Even has it changed one pass away or two passes away, the types of defenses that teams are playing?
So I'd say there's definitely a good amount of teams doing what you're describing. The help only when necessary style is kind of what I've been calling it. But there are quite a few teams. I mean, San Diego State is probably the best pack line team this season. Like their numbers are actually better than Virginia's defensively, or Louisville's, some Indiana, some of the more well-known pack line teams. And San Diego State, I mean, they shrink the floor. Everyone's up on closer to the ball. The team I'm working on right now, a video on, is Houston, and they're one of these teams that's kind of hard to exactly identify what you should call their defense, but they put two on the ball constantly in ball screens. It's not necessarily like a hard hedge, but it's two on the ball in every ball screen situation with the 5-man. They'll switch 1 through 4, but with the 5-man. And then they double the post. I mean, that's been their big thing. That's what Kelvin Sampson has almost become known for in coaching circles is doubling the post. And for the video I'm making, I have some quotes of their coaching staff talking about how they want to take away twos over threes. But you have a team like Loyola, who I did a video on, that, I mean, they're pretty much the opposite. It's all about tough twos. And I think that the D1 game right now is at a really, really good place where you can do it a lot of different ways. I think that lower levels, simply protecting the rim or stopping the ball, and because shooting isn't at a younger age isn't quite as efficient. I think that the game is very clearly designed for stopping the ball. I think that the NBA is the other way almost. It's like you can't give any help because everyone's so good on the floor. And so just from like an experimental coaching perspective, I'm biased though, because I cover D1 basketball, but I do think that it's at a pretty good spot where it's like a little bit of both sides of, it's a little bit like high school basketball and it's a little bit like NBA basketball, and you can play it both ways.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the specific teams, and it may be some of the things that we just talked about here. So let me kind of go through each of these. I've got kind of a different question. You can talk as long or as short on each one as you want to. I'll start with Alabama. What do you like about Nate Oates' team? And then that, again, going back to the pace, space, shot selection. Yep. When I read that article, I think everybody read, I don't know the person who wrote it at all, but it almost sounded like, he's doing this and the NBA is doing this and he's revolutionary at the college level that's doing this. I know high school teams that are doing that. Sure. I think it's just becoming like more of an emphasis. So aside from just playing with pace and space and shot selection, what do you like about his team?
Yeah, that's a good point. Even in the 5-out video that I did, I had a clip from like a 2010 practice of Richmond, running 5-out, like exactly what is now being run 5-out. And really, it's before 2010. That was just the YouTube clip I found, and you're right. Like, I probably should have mentioned this a little bit more in the video, but there's tons of high school coaches running 5-out motion. I think it's a little bit different than what college teams are running. It's like more of the Bob Knight style of motion than the 5-out stuff that a lot of teams are running. Is very dribble handoff oriented and some more ball screens. It's a little bit different, but I agree with you. As for Alabama, they're confusing because they're really good defensively. It's like their pace and space, and it's not just saying that they're playing fast. Like, they're number 2 in offensive possession length. The numbers back it up that they actually do play fast. But they're an average for a high major team. They're very average offensively. and they're elite defensively. I actually am a little bit concerned about them though, because some of their defensive success is 3-point luck. Their opponents are shooting under 30% from three as of a couple of days ago on the season, and defenses don't have total control over that. So I would expect some regression towards the mean there. The other thing I heard in a Nate Oates interview a while back about how surprised he was that they've been this good defensively. Like they had certain goals and they've completely shattered those goals. To me, like that's actually not the best sign. Like there's probably been some luck involved if your coaching staff is that surprised. So between those two things, the 3-point percentage, especially, I would expect maybe some regression, but also it's the nature of a single elimination tournament is it's 40 minutes. They can continue shooting poorly from three. The other opposite can happen. And then we'll write about it like it was destined to happen afterwards, regardless. So
I'm not sure if they still are, but at one point here recently, Michigan was ranked in the top 10 offensive and defensive efficiently. Let's go with the offensive side. What do you like about their offense?
Yeah, so they're 6th in offense and 4 in defense right now. So they're still top 10 in both. Michigan is. I would, if you're a coach listening, I would definitely recommend checking out the Michigan offense. It's a fun watch from an X's and O's standpoint. First of all, they have a really, really good ball movement. I think that's like the prevailing theme. They have a really good back to the basket post up guy, a quick, speedy point guard, and then wings. And so athletic kind of slashing wings. And so they play a diverse way of playing offense. They can use all three of those different play types. And Juwan Howard has a pretty large playbook, which is fun from an X's and O's perspective. But then regardless of what they're running, the ball movement is really good. They're not an amazing 3-point shooting team. Especially one thing I highlighted from them is that they catch to drive a lot, which can be really good for them. I think that they kind of maximize that skill, but also sometimes it's like just shoot it when you're open. So I do really like watching them, and I do think that Michigan is really good. But naturally, we think really highly of them after the wins and less after the losses too. So
yeah, I mean, speaking to the Illinois loss last week, any concern? That was a thumping. That wasn't a loss. That was a thumping.
Yeah. I mean, Illinois' defensive game plan was really good. They always drop in ball screens. Illinois' default ball screen coverage is drop coverage, and they have a legitimate 7-footer, Kofi Coburn, who's gotten, when he's a sophomore last year, the first 10 games of his freshman season, he was pretty brutal in ball screens, guarding ball screens. And I think they've dropped him even more since then. They're having him get up a little bit, but also he's just gotten a lot better. It really bothered Michigan, who didn't want to take those, for good reason, didn't want to take those pull-up twos, the mid-range twos against it, against the drop, and we're struggling to get to the rim against Coburn and the backup center for Illinois too. I'll butcher his last name, but Georgie is his first name. So, so I think that to me, it didn't seem like it was total luck by any means. That Illinois game plan was solid, but you do have to have that 7-footer to really be effective with the way they were with that drop coverage. But it'll be interesting to see how teams start to scheme against Michigan in the conference tournament and in the NCAA tournament too.
Probably one of those where it sounds great if you have a game plan, but you also have to have the personnel as well. And I think we sometimes undervalue that. Another Big Ten team, Iowa, according to Synergy, they post up 15% of their offensive possessions. They're ranked in the 97th percentile at 1.03 points per possession in the post. Obviously Luka is a big part of that, but post ups with a big guy, a really big guy, when you have somebody that's playing that way, a style that nowadays a lot of teams aren't playing that way, does that make a difference from a defensive perspective? Because it's one thing to know how to go, like you said, to go double a post player and the rotations and work on that. But a lot of teams aren't playing that way necessarily these days. Does that cause any problem?
I agree, but the one place where they are playing that way is the Big Ten. There's a lot. There are a lot of Big Ten teams that post up, which is,
for then the tournament when you're not playing Big Ten teams, because
no doubt,
wow, they're really good now.
Yeah, Big Ten is interesting because I think it's pretty far and away the best conference from top to bottom, but it is a lot different than mid-major leagues. It's a hard thing to measure or really evaluate because it's been a weird year with non-conference games and all of that. But I think it's a good point. Luka Garza in particular can just really overwhelm certain teams with his size. And what Iowa does a really good job of, they're a motion-based offense. But when you have the leading scorer in the country, naturally it becomes a little bit more post isos at times, as it should, then it's not always equal opportunity motion. But they do a really good job of moving on the backside as Garza's posting up. So they'll set flare screens on the weak side. They'll exchange on the weak side. They'll set pin downs. And so as soon as someone locks in to help, a lot of teams will try to front Garza, so lock in on that weak side help. And now there's some motion going on where a lot of the guys on their team can shoot. And they have some pretty good passers too. Fran McCaffrey's son, Connor, is a really good post-entry passer. So they have given teams a lot of trouble. Their big thing is they don't guard very well, and they've been guarding a lot better recently. I don't necessarily have a strong opinion on if I really haven't watched their defense too much lately, if that's sustainable or not. But them and Gonzaga are, and I guess you can put Baylor in the mix too. Those are the best offensive teams in the country.
I'll come back to that in a moment. Let me talk about mid-majors, smaller teams, lesser, that we don't necessarily always pay attention to. I'm from South Carolina. I know members of the Winthrop coaching staff, so I'm partial a little bit. I know you've paid attention to them this year. Is there a mid-major like Winthrop or even Winthrop that would potentially make some noise in the tournament, maybe even win 2 or even 3 games?
Yeah, Winthrop, I tweeted some of their plays. I haven't watched like full games of them, to be honest with you. But they just from what I have watched, they're well coached, and they've got the Chandler Vaudrin. Hopefully I'm saying that right. He's got 3 triple doubles on the year. But yeah, I guess the mid-major or from a mid-major league that I've focused on the most has been Loyola Chicago, who I'm sure everyone listening remembers their Final Four run just 4 years ago now. I think that you can make a pretty good case that this team is better than that team. They certainly are ranked higher in efficiency metrics than that previous team was that made the Final Four. That team almost lost in the first round. So it's hard to say how things shake out when they tip the ball up in the NCAA tournament. But they're really, really good defensively. I believe Loyola Chicago is number 1 right now. Yeah, they're still number 1 in defensive efficiency. The thing, they're fun to watch. I really enjoyed making the video that I put together on them. But if you watch they played Wisconsin in non-conference and Richmond in non-conference. Those were their two best games, and they did not look that good. They did not look like the number one defense in the country in those two games. My point in the video was I probably would have said the same exact thing about the Loyola team that went to the Final Four. They lost a couple games in non-conference play, so it's hard to say. But specifically in the Wisconsin game, they're getting blown by a little bit. They're a team that doesn't like to give a lot of help. And so it feels like they're able to really, really blow out Missouri Valley teams because of how much easier it is to guard the ball than against a team like Wisconsin. But I'd love to have a larger sample size there. They just didn't play a ton of those types of teams.
Right. This is the last one that has to do with this. I had a Twitter poll recently, and you already talked about these teams, but Gonzaga, Baylor, Michigan, or the field. Your vote to cut down the nets this year would be who?
So I get all three of them if I pick them? Is that
No, you have to pick Gonzaga or Baylor or Michigan, or would you take the field?
Yeah, so I think the right pick there is the field if you can only take one. I think that Gonzaga is a pretty big favorite, but it's almost impossible to be over 50% to win 6 games in a row. It's really difficult. I would be curious, like that Anthony Davis Kentucky team. We could probably look it up what they were going into it, but they weren't 50%. And so but I mean, I am definitely not someone who worries about Gonzaga's recent schedule. I just they've made more Sweet 16s than anyone in the last however many. I don't know what the stats are. If someone ever whines about Gonzaga, their fans will come to the rescue with the Sweet 16 stats. Yeah, I mean, they played a tough non-conference schedule and looked pretty dominant. And I think even like they've changed their starting lineup since then. Andrew Nembhard now starts. They play smaller. That would be the one thing that I'm worried about with them is they do have size, but they don't necessarily use it that much. Their best lineup is small ball. And so a Hunter Dickinson, who's 7-footer on Michigan, or even a Kofi Coburn, that's interesting because Drew Timmy's their big, and they definitely don't want to get him in foul trouble. So how they would kind of guard those 7-footers, that's interesting. But on the other hand, those 7-footers are going to have to guard Gonzaga. So it evens out a little bit.
Right. We've plugged a couple of your videos already, but when people get done listening to this, which 1, 2, or 3 breakdowns would you recommend they go watch? Maybe the ones that you enjoyed putting together the most this year.
Yeah. Well, the YouTube channel is Hoop Vision 68. And yeah, I think maybe the Loyola Chicago video. I think it's a good one. It's an interesting defensive scheme that they run. I've got some clips of Porter Moser talking about it, so it's not just me. There's some good stuff in there, especially if you're on the coaching side of stuff. And then hopefully the YouTube algorithm, after you watch the first one, will just recommend the next one, and there you go.
There you go. Lost for hours. Yeah. Great opportunity to prep for your bracket pool, which leads me to, lest that you forgot that I would go without putting some pressure on you again this year. Is there a Hoop Vision bracket challenge this year?
Oh man, I kind of remember what was my answer last year.
Last year was you should hire me to do your marketing, but you still didn't put one together. But I let you off the hook last year because obviously the tournament was canceled and we weren't
right. Ooh, that's
still have some time. You probably have about 4 days here although if people aren't listening to this live, then hopefully there will already have been a Hoop Vision bracket challenge for them to sign up for.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think. I do have some Hoop Vision merch that it could maybe like give away.
Even a shirt. Yeah. So be on the lookout for that. If we do that, then I'll post that in the description or something. You can go sign up for that and win a Hoop Vision. Hoop Vision, not Hoops Vision. HoopVisionHQ.com is where you want to go look for all of that information. So that's Jordan Sperber of Hoop Vision. Be sure to check him out. I saw actually on the store you have for sale the Tournament Bible from a couple years ago. I feel like for the Hoops junkie, that would still be, or for the coach, that would still be a great purchase. And it was only like $5, I think. So.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny because sometimes I feel like there's, especially these teams that bring everyone back. It's like it's not that. I mean, there are some that are very different, but I was thinking about that this year. It's like I've written about Creighton's offensive scheme for 3 years in a row. Like it doesn't change that much, you know. So
copy and paste to this year's version of it. You could probably get away with that, and people wouldn't even recognize it. So, always a pleasure talking with you, Jordan. Thanks so much for coming back on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Hopefully, we don't cancel the NCAA tournament again this time.
Absolutely. Fingers crossed.